The small, quaint town of Dover, Massachusetts was nestled in rolling hills and thick forests, the kind of place where everyone knew each other and children played freely under the watchful eyes of their parents. The spring of 1977 was like any other, with the crisp air carrying the scent of blooming flowers and fresh-cut grass. But this particular spring would be remembered for something far more sinister, the sighting of the Dover Demon. On the night of April 21, 1977, Tommy Baker and Jacob Stevens, both 17 years old, were driving home from a friend's house. The boys had been discussing their plans for the upcoming summer, eager for the freedom that came with the end of the school year. As they cruised down Farm Street, the road was dark and deserted, the only light coming from the headlights of Tommy's old Ford pickup. The boys were deep in conversation when Tommy suddenly hit the brakes, causing the truck to screech to a halt. Jacob was thrown forward, bracing himself against the dashboard. "What the hell, man?" Jacob exclaimed, looking at Tommy with a mix of anger and confusion. Tommy didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on something ahead, something that had darted across the road just moments before. Jacob followed his gaze and felt a chill run down his spine. There, illuminated by the truck's headlights, stood a creature unlike anything they had ever seen. The creature was small, no more than 4 feet tall, with a large, bulbous head that seemed too big for its thin, spindly body. Its skin was a pale, almost translucent white, and its eyes were large and glowing with an eerie, orange-red hue. It had no visible mouth, nose, or ears, and its long, slender fingers ended in sharp, claw-like nails. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as the boys stared at the creature, and it stared back at them. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the creature turned and scuttled off into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. What was that?" Jacob whispered, his voice trembling. "I don't know," Tommy replied, his hand still gripping the steering wheel tightly. "But we need to get out of here." He slammed his foot on the gas pedal, and the truck sped down the road, leaving the strange encounter behind them. The boys drove in silence, their minds racing with what they had just witnessed. When they reached Jacob's house, they rushed inside and told his parents what had happened. Mr. and Mrs. Stevens listened with skepticism but could see the genuine fear in the boys' eyes. "Maybe it was just an animal," Mr. Stevens suggested, trying to reassure them. "Or a trick of the light." "No," Tommy insisted. "It wasn't an animal. It was something else." The boys knew what they had seen, and no amount of rational explanation could change that. They decided to report the incident to the police the next day, hoping that someone would believe them and investigate. The following morning, Tommy and Jacob went to the Dover Police Department and recounted their story to Officer Mark Turner. Officer Turner was known for his level-headedness and professionalism, but even he struggled to believe what the boys were describing. "You're saying you saw a creature?" Officer Turner asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," Tommy replied. "We both saw it. It was right there in the middle of the road." Officer Turner sighed and rubbed his temples. "Okay, I'll make a note of it. But if this is some kind of prank, you two are going to be in a lot of trouble." "It's not a prank," Jacob insisted. "We're telling the truth." Despite his doubts, Officer Turner decided to investigate the area where the boys claimed to have seen the creature. He drove out to Farm Street that afternoon, looking for any signs of unusual activity. The road was quiet and empty, just as the boys had described. He searched the surrounding woods, but found nothing out of the ordinary. As he was about to leave, he noticed something strange on the ground near the edge of the road. It was a set of footprints, unlike any he had ever seen. The prints were small, with long, thin toes that ended in pointed tips. He took out his camera and snapped a few photos, then returned to the station to examine them more closely. Meanwhile, word of the boys' encounter had spread through the town. Dover was a tight-knit community, and it didn't take long for rumors to start circulating. Some people dismissed the story as a hoax or a case of overactive imaginations, while others believed that something truly strange was happening. A few days later, another sighting was reported. A young couple, Abby and Eric, claimed to have seen the creature while walking home from a late-night movie. They described it in the same way Tommy and Jacob had, a small, humanoid figure with a large head and glowing eyes. This second sighting added credibility to the boy's story and sparked even more interest and fear in the town. Local newspapers picked up the story, dubbing the creature the Dover Demon. Reporters flocked to the town, eager to interview the witnesses and gather details. The once quiet streets were now buzzing with activity, as people speculated about the nature of the creature and what it might want. Tommy and Jacob found themselves at the center of the media frenzy. They were interviewed by journalists and questioned by curious townsfolk. The attention was overwhelming, and the boys struggled to process everything that was happening. "I just want things to go back to normal," Jacob said one afternoon as they sat in Tommy's backyard. "I wish we'd never seen that thing." "Me too," Tommy agreed. "But we can't change what happened. All we can do is try to figure out what it was." As the days turned into weeks, sightings of the Dover Demon continued. People reported seeing the creature in various parts of town, always watching from a distance. The fear and tension in Dover grew, and some residents began to avoid going out at night. One evening, Tommy and Jacob decided to return to the spot where they had first seen the creature. They hoped to find some clues or evidence that might explain what was happening. Armed with flashlights and a sense of determination, they set off down Farm Street. The road was eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of gravel under their feet. As they approached the spot where the creature had appeared, both boys felt a sense of unease. They shone their flashlights into the woods, searching for any sign of movement. "Do you see anything?" Jacob whispered, his voice barely audible. "No," Tommy replied. "But it feels like we're being watched." They continued down the road, their flashlights sweeping over the trees and underbrush. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from the woods, and both boys froze. The noise grew louder, and they saw a pair of glowing eyes staring back at them. "It's here," Tommy said, his voice trembling. The creature stepped into the light, its form exactly as they remembered. It stood motionless, watching them with its eerie, unblinking eyes. The boys felt a wave of fear wash over them, but they knew they had to stay calm. "Why are you here?" Jacob asked, his voice shaking. "What do you want?" The creature tilted its head slightly, as if trying to understand. Then, without warning, it turned and scuttled back into the woods, disappearing from sight. Tommy and Jacob stood in stunned silence, their minds racing with questions. What was the creature? Why was it here? And what did it want from them? As they made their way back to town, they couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was still watching them. They knew that whatever it wasn't going to leave Dover anytime soon. In the weeks that followed, the sightings of the Dover Demon became less frequent, but the fear and uncertainty remained. People were on edge, and the once peaceful town felt changed forever. Tommy and Jacob tried to go back to their normal lives, but the experience had left a lasting impact on them. They often found themselves looking over their shoulders, half expecting to see the creature lurking in the shadows. One night, as they were hanging out in Tommy's basement, Jacob brought up a troubling thought. "What if it's not just one creature?" he said. "What if there are more of them?" Tommy's eyes widened. "You think there could be a whole group of them?" "I don't know," Jacob replied. "But it would explain why we've seen it in different places. Maybe they're moving around, watching us." The thought sent a chill down Tommy's spine. The idea that there could be more creatures out there, watching and waiting, was almost too much to bear. As the months passed, the sightings dwindled, and life in Dover slowly began to return to normal. But the memory of the Dover Demon lingered, a dark shadow over the town. Tommy and Jacob never forgot what they had seen, and they never stopped searching for answers. They spent countless hours researching similar sightings and trying to piece together the mystery of the creature. One night, nearly a year after their initial encounter, they received a call from Officer Turner. He had found something that might shed light on the mystery. "I was going through some old files," Turner said, "and I found a report from the 1950s. It describes a creature just like the one you saw." Tommy and Jacob hurried to the police station, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Officer Turner showed them the file, which detailed a sighting of a similar creature in the same area. "This can't be a coincidence," Tommy said. "There has to be a connection." Jacob nodded. "We need to find out more. There must be other reports, other sightings." The boys dove into their research with renewed determination, combing through old newspapers, library archives, and police records. They discovered that the Dover demon wasn't the only strange creature reported in the area. There were accounts of other bizarre sightings, dating back decades. Despite their efforts, the boys were never able to find a definitive explanation for what they had seen. The mystery of the Dover demon remained unsolved, a haunting enigma that continued to captivate and terrify the town of Dover. And as the years went by, the legend of the Dover demon grew, becoming a chilling tale passed down through generations. Some believed it was a creature from another world, others thought it was a figment of overactive imaginations. But for Tommy and Jacob, the memory of that night was all too real, a reminder that there are some mysteries that may never be fully understood. The town of Dover never forgot the strange events of 1977, and the story of the Dover demon became a permanent part of its folklore. Travelers passing through would often stop to ask about the creature, and locals would recount the tale with a mixture of fear and fascination. But for those who had lived through it, the memory was a reminder that there are things in this world that defy explanation, and sometimes the unknown can be more terrifying than anything imagined. And so, the Dover demon remained a silent sentinel in the dark woods, forever watching, forever waiting, its true nature a mystery that would never be solved.